All right. Well, good evening, everyone, again. And I know, we have a chance to more or less talk this storytelling session. And the topic is, let me see if I can pull it up. Why is it difficult to meet new people? And I think we all have had different life experiences where it's been a challenge to meet new people. Maybe you move to different areas, new areas, and you're hoping to find and make connections with different groups. And so that's the main question of this storytelling session. So I'll start off with you all. Think about that question offhand. How's it been for you meeting new people, making new friends, things like that?
Ooh, friends. That's an interesting word. How do we define that? So I'm Micae Brown. I am from Chicago, and I'm an entrepreneur and I work with small and medium-sized businesses across the country. I wanted to be a part of this conversation because I don't necessarily use the friend term too loosely internally, but I think I use it loosely externally because Chicago is such a relationship-based city where we call everyone our friend. But they really aren't your friend because in 2 seconds, they will flip the script and then they will be your worst enemy and destroying your career. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation and dive deep into it. And I hope I answered your question loosely because I don't want to necessarily kick it off. I don't want to be the one to throw the axe in. Yeah. I'm waiting for Nora to perhaps be that person.
I got you.
Thank you.
Well then, Nora, if you could more or less proceed as well, if you can introduce yourself and then again, more or less speak on the topic at hand, which is, how difficult has it been for you to meet people and how you've managed to handle those challenges?
Sure. So my name is Nora Rahimian. I'm a creative consultant. I help creative entrepreneurs and mostly musicians achieve success without selling out their creative control or their financial freedom or their personal integrity, focusing on building relationships across borders and doing social impact work. I lived on 3 continents before I was 3. My family, I was born in Iran. We left during the Iran-Iraq war as immigrants and refugees. And so this having to build relationships quickly was a survival skill that I learned really early on. Before I even knew what like attachment was or how to construct friendships. And I think the reason why it's hard to build relationships is one that we don't always know what people want from us. I see this especially in creative industries. And I'll say as a woman, maybe there's like an extra level of uncertainty. Are you trying to sleep with me? Are you trying to network with me? Are you really trying to be my friend? And so because there's such confusion and people aren't straightforward, it makes me at least much more hesitant to open up and really start to build a relationship. At the same time, I'm in an industry where relationships are everything. And so there's a degree of having to be the risk taker and say, okay, I'm just going to trust this and then see what happens. And that's the part where I think doing self-work is really important. And so I think part of the challenge we see now around building relationships is people really, really put the pressure on like the friend. I haven't met the right, like they externalize it, where really a lot of the work is, have you done the internal healing and like the internal work to be able to receive friends, to be able to have healthy boundaries, to be able to move on if something doesn't hit the way you want it to hit. And so I think those are conversations we don't always have when we're talking about relationships and friendships.
To piggyback on what Nora's talking about in terms of the internal work, I think that we all come from, especially, let's just take millennials, for example, and I'm using the term millennials very loosely, but I'm just going to consider everyone on this panel and on this call a millennial because you're using technology. We probably witnessed our families go through a divorce or lose a job, or we probably experienced some pretty tumultuous things in our childhoods, which probably gave us some insecurities in friendships and relationships in general. And then now millennials aren't getting married, they aren't having kids, we aren't settling down on a job, we aren't super, super loyal with brands, like we'll flip-flop, So I think where we come from has a big impact on how we bond and make friendships. And then I think insert technology in that and like the Kim Kardashian life, it makes things so much harder.
Yeah, no, I definitely can understand that. When I think about my own particular life, I think it can be a challenge meeting people, especially if you have to change jobs or if you move to a different area. Starting a new network can be challenging, especially when you don't know any people or know anyone. And so I think one of the things I've always tried to do is just look around potentially workplaces to find people to reach out to. But I think I've also had opportunities to try to reach out to different networks of people that I have in the area. And I think that all helps with that process. And so when you think about your time back home, do you think of, and yeah, do you think of more or less what you do regularly to make those connections with people, to more or less meet new people in the particular area where you are?
So you're asking, do we take the time to do that?
Yeah, yeah.
This is being recorded. Of course, we take the time to meet new people. We value those friendships and relationships, and those are very important. I'm an extroverted introvert, so I'm 50-50. And I think that, one day you'll get me and I'm like on, and then I need to like recharge, and then I'm like, goodbye. I'm also a person that has a hard time trusting. So we can definitely have very surface level relationships. Like we can take shots if we go to the bar, if you actually get me out of my onesie. We can, dance to music if you finally get me exposed to all the germs at some festival. But when it comes to sharing, my innermost, deepest, darkest secrets, I don't necessarily know if I would be doing that. And it's kind of hard to find people that you trust nowadays, especially with the rate at which things can spread online. I think we're all just very cautious about what we share. So how do we have authentic relationships and build trust when, your reputation could be damaged in the blink of an eye?
That makes me think about, I think we live in a world where we're actually very there's a lot of connection, right? People have 3,000 Facebook friends or 2,000 followers or whatever. And we're consuming people's lives very quickly. But it's a very one-way relationship. So you create this false sense of connection where I know everything about Marcus because I've stalked his Instagram, for example, but there's no reciprocity. It's not a two-way relationship. And so Marcus and I don't actually know each other. And so what we have is connection without intimacy. And so I think where people stall is deepening that connection and building something out of it. And so it's things and I love people. I talk to strangers on the street. Well, I used to talk to strangers on the street. But it's an intentional thing about having learned to reach out after a Twitter exchange and DM someone and say, hey, let's take this further, or hey, let's get on a phone call, or so that we have to be very intentional, I think, about creating these opportunities for reciprocity so that then intimacy can happen. And I don't just mean intimacy romantic intimacy, which I think is the way people often only think about it. But you want intimacy in your friendships, and you want intimacy, and that because that's where vulnerability and trust and all those things that you alluded to come up. And so I think that's the thing, is we're overly connected but not intimate enough.
Yeah. How do you all feel about narcissism? So this is a huge thing, it's a trending word right now. And we live in a world full of narcissists. And this is one thing that I'm personally afraid of. What if you get into the hands of a narcissist and they blow your life up? But did you all know that baby boomers are one of the biggest generations of narcissists? And those are the people that, we're supposed to be we're supposed to be leaning on for trust and advice. So, I think that the narcissism from the baby boomers, right? Yes, I am calling them narcissists. And then the trickle down effect, we do have narcissists in the millennial generation. I think it puts out a whole lot of trust issues that we have with friendships. And I think people are just sometimes either not trusting because of those things.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. When I think about my own personal relationships, it's always interesting to think about, who people are and who they are representing, what their backgrounds are, what their potentially general motivations are or underlying motivations. and then trying to assess from there whether they are good people. I do know, since I've worked in media, it can be a challenge sort of knowing who, or more or less, I am working in media. It can be a challenge knowing who, quality people are, who people who will generally support you, and who might be a little more backstabby. And so that's always something to think about. But typically, I try to put my best foot forward and just, show my best colors, and then more or less see what responses I get. And I think I can have some success with that, but sometimes you really don't know until you hang out with someone outside of work too. So those are some of the things that I think about. Now, do you all do anything like that specifically, or I guess in general, have you had any good experiences where you really connected with people, either at work or outside of work, and some of the things you all have done?
Can I say something on the narcissist question first?
Yeah.
Because I think even in our generation, there's, and I say our generation like really broadly, there's this rhetoric of like self-care and self-love that's very superficial. And so people use that as I'm just doing me, without any sense of communal responsibility. And so you don't exist in a vacuum. You exist in a community. You exist in relation to people. And whether we acknowledge it or not, when you build a relationship with someone, you're entering a social contract. And so the rhetoric of like a false self-care, this like good vibes only nonsense, I think that's where the kind of narcissism comes up. But then there's no language to pinpoint it or to point it out, because people just are like, well, I'm just taking care of myself. Oh, this is just self-love. And so there's something about accountability that also gets lost in that mix. And I think that's true of boomers. I think that's true of our generation. But the boomer question to me brings up questions of like privilege and power. Mm-hmm. And that's where the trust has really, in my eyes, been broken. Here you are, you have all this access, you have all this power, you have all this privilege, and you fucked us all over.
Royally, up the ass,
like
and the other
royally,
way.
So like so selfishly, so single-mindedly, and we're supposed to pretend like that's okay? Like, no, that is an unhealthy relationship. And so that's the part. And I think people who are uncomfortable with boundaries, people who themselves don't have healthy boundaries, react really poorly when other people set boundaries and set limits, because they're trying to flip the narrative on, well, it's your fault, right? Like they don't want to take responsibility for anything. And I think that's part of what we're seeing now, is this like push and pull of boundaries, where maybe we're at a space where we're starting to identify this doesn't feel good, this isn't right, but we haven't quite figured out how to replace it or how to heal it. Or we're in that process of learning to heal and like fix the mistakes that like our parents' generation made or whatnot. And so I think there's partly like this discomfort of transition that we're all experiencing as we're learning to do better than our ancestors did. But it's like, it's so many things all at once, because it is the political, context that we exist in. It is the practice of self-care. It is like all these other things. So I don't know. I mean, Marcus, I think your question specifically was like, are we reaching out? I mean, I reach out to people all the time. I'm that person who's like in the DMs, like, hey, I really liked your post about blah, 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 blah. I want to meet other dope women of color. Let's talk. Like, I'm very intentional about that. But I will say that it's much easier for me to do that in professional spaces than it is. Like, I don't know what the equivalent of that socially would look like. Hey, I think you're cool. Let's be friends. Seems like a weird DM to send. But I can send it as like a, hey, I think you're doing interesting work. Let's collaborate. But maybe that's the start to something else. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess when you've thought about potentially where you met with people in other cities, have you had a chance to think about how you make those things happen as well? Because I think anytime you visit a new city, I mean, it can be a challenge finding people, meeting people. I know typically baseball games, bars, things like that can help. Where you can interact with the people. But I'm curious to know if you all have ever, went to a special event and it's been a really great one, a great mixer to really connect with people.
I have met some of the best people not outside of my hometown. Like, I have a very close friend that I met in New York, and like she's here in Chicago. And then I've also met some amazing people outside of the country. And I would say like non-American, I hate to say that, whatever, I don't give a shit. Non-American people have been so great to meet, and it's been like so just like real, and it's been awesome. Like I got to stay with the host family in South Africa who just like welcomed me in, fed me, did all this great stuff. The people in the club are even nice, and it's just a completely different dynamic. And so everywhere I've gone, I feel like outside of the US, I've built better connections, and they've been long-standing outside of, than here. Now, I've had great connections here. Obviously, this is like home, so you should have some long-standing connections. And I think I am at an advantage because both of my parents have 9 siblings. So I definitely have like a huge like support network in that way as well. But I would say get outside of the country. That's where the cool people are.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Nora, I guess, what are your thoughts on things like that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we do at Culture Fix intentionally is be kind of like a matchmaker for creatives who want to connect across borders. And I feel really lucky because I think the best way to meet people is through someone you already know, right? Like someone's going to vouch for you, they're going to vouch for the other person. It takes a little bit of that risk away. And so whenever I'm going somewhere, I put a call out to my networks and, hey, I'm coming to Ghana. Hey, I'm going to be in Hawaii this weekend. Who should I know? And then that introduction leads to another introduction, leads to another introduction. And now I'm like in this community in a way that I wouldn't have been before. And so that, to me, it's like start where you know and make those asks, because that's when like the world shows up to you. I'm not like a go to the bar person. I'm not like, but I will look at like, who do I know in different, I'm also, really good at reaching out to someone I haven't talked to in 3 years and being like, hey, are you still in X city? Because I'm coming your way. Let's grab coffee. And so the really like nurturing existing relationships as a starting point for new ones has worked for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess so I guess when you think about being at home and different types of seasons, whether it's summer, winter, fall, or spring, I always feel like summer is the time where people can meet up the most, at least where I've lived. But for you all back in the Chi, what is that best season for people to be out and about and really networking and meeting?
You already answered the question, Marcus. It's the summertime.
Yeah, summertime.
I'm shy. That's when like people are in a good mood. I mean, if for those that are watching that aren't in Chicago, like in the wintertime, like you even look at people's faces when you're walking to work, everybody has an attitude. It's like, it's brutal. But then in the summertime, you look at people's faces, like even the dogs are smiling like bigger, like everyone is happy that's a very big generality, but you all know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Summertime is a great way to meet people. I mean, people are out sitting on the parks, everyone is speaking. It's like, wow, you didn't speak to me, when it was below 0, but now I'm a human, like we had like a huge shift in just our mood. And that may even have to do with like the fact that we don't get a lot of sun, we don't have a lot of vitamin D, we don't have a lot of positive stimulation. It could have a lot to do with the environment as well, but the summertime, absolutely. And what I also love about Chicago is since we do put a lot of emphasis on summertime, there's a lot of things to do. So there's tons of activities. So if you go to a couple of activities, you've just about met everybody in whatever network you want because the groups are small. So unfortunately, Chicago is very segregated. So it's a blessing and a curse. If you want to meet professional Black people, you go to a couple of events, you met all the professional Black people. You want to go and meet some Asian Americans, you go to a couple of Asian American events, you met all the Asian American people. So we're segregated. And so in a way you can kind of like hit up, various events that are segregated, and you can meet all the people in that market. So it's a blessing and a curse because we should kind of be getting together and sharing food and drink recipes, but that's just not the time we're living at.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I always think too, since I've had the opportunity to live in a smaller town, it does seem like in the winter months, it's definitely a lot more quieter, a little cooler as well, obviously. And And then, things will start or do start to get a little more active during the spring. And when I think about the summer, based on what I've heard, people typically do not come outside during the day because it's so hot and intensely humid. But at night, people are out and about, exploring. But it's always interesting being in a smaller town because the population is not as large. You don't see as many people, and I think it adds to the dilemma of how difficult it can be to meet and interact with new people. And I guess, have you all in your professional lives come across more of cliquey groups or anything like that, where it may have been a little more difficult to connect or more or less dip in or dive in more or less to what those groups were all about, who those people in those groups were about?
You should ask that question. I got to take my camera off so I can just the faces that I want to make.
Your face said it all. 100%. There's cliquey group, there's people who have lots of ego for whatever reason, right? Their own like preconceptions or whatever. I think when I was younger and like earlier in my career, there was a desire to like prove them wrong or convince them. And now I'm like, look, I'm not trying to chase after anybody who's not human enough, who doesn't care. Like for me, there's certain like value systems that are really important. And if like basic human dignity is like not one of them, I'm really not trying to bring you into my network because this is how you're going to treat people that no. So I'm very interested in working with people who are like open and connecting with people who are open. And if you're not, we're not a good match. And that's okay. And that's true professionally and personally. I'm not chasing after anyone.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess too, when I think about just the opportunities in the city, in terms of how you meet people just on area trains, I mean, is that ever an option for you all? Do you all ever feel like you interact with people on the L or whether you're headed into the north side or the south side or even the west side for anything?
I mean, I'm in LA, so there's no, we're a very car culture, which actually is one of the things when I used to live in New York, that used to happen all the time. You meet people on the streets. LA doesn't have that same culture. And so kind of the random meetings might happen at like a flea market, or it happens at like, you go hiking somewhere and you see the same people hiking at the same place you hike. It happens in these different places. And what I found to be true across places is you just have to start start talking to someone, and people, like, you'll see the same person at the same spot forever and you never start a conversation. How are you going to expect to start a relationship or make a friendship if you don't talk to someone? And I see this even at conferences. Like, you're there for networking, but you're on your phone the whole time. Or you go to like some mixer, but you and your friend talk to each other the whole time, but that's your friend you already know. So what's the point? And that's the thing, is like, I think for me, no matter where I've been, stepping outside of my own comfort zone to like break the ice and talk to a stranger has been the most important part.
Oh, this is a good question.
That makes sense. And I guess too, like I said, I always have to go back to small towns, because a lot of times they don't have as much public transportation, maybe a couple of buses here or there. A lot of times people are in their cars. So I feel like you are a little more distant. And so I think that does make it a little challenging. But I guess I'm curious too, do you all ever connect through professional websites like LinkedIn or other services that allow you to connect with people? Has that ever been helpful in terms of meeting people, and has that added any difficulty to your lives or anything like that?
Added any difficulty to our lives?
Yeah, because I feel like sometimes, and I guess I'll explain a little bit more. I feel like sometimes when you connect digitally, you are not necessarily physically interacting with people. And I feel like that's a part of the communication as well. Body language, all those things, also verbally. And so, I guess you would think that all of that matters. And so you just would wonder, how does that digital side of things really make it accessible or inaccessible to connect with people?
I meet people on Twitter. Like, Twitter and Instagram are probably my two main like places. I feel like it actually allows me to get to know people better than I would if we had just met randomly in the street. Because I get to see your sense of humor. I get to see like what you think is funny, what kind of content you're retweeting, like who else's thoughts you value. Like I get your value system really clearly. And so in the last few years, I've probably met and built more relationships with people that I've met online than I have in real life. And also what that does is allow me to, I'm not geographically limited for my friendship circle. So I can just find the people that are right for me rather than having to choose from like what's available in my city vicinity.
Yeah.
I like, that's a really good point. I think my experience is the complete opposite. I think my life online doesn't necessarily reflect 100% of who I am. Just because, you know, coming from a media background and then running an agency, you have to be very careful of what you post online and things like that. Like I was skeptical of wearing my Thug Life t-shirt, and I was like, you know what, like I'm actually going to wear it. So I guess it depends on what market you're in, what you do professionally, and what consequences are going to happen if you actually say exactly how you feel or whatever online. I think that meeting people professionally online is, especially coming from being a recruiter as well, is great. It was completely different like 8 years ago. And now I think like the online population is so saturated, it's hard to find the people that have genuine intentions. So I think we have like a whole lot of clutter. And so for me personally, it's hard for me to sift through all of that. So yes, I'm still making connections, but I don't think they're as meaningful as I would via an introduction. So I value introductions that connections make to me. Hey, this is like a thoughtful, intentional introduction. Great. I'm like linking and latching onto this because someone co-signed on your behalf. Because now anyone can get an account. I don't know if you're catfishing me. You know, you all have seen catfish. Yeah. So I just now I'm super skeptical because the internet is so free and there's so many psychos out there. I want to know if you've been co-signed. Like who has ever heard of someone catfishing a LinkedIn account? Somebody probably has like fake LinkedIn. Who knows? So I'm the skeptic. Nora's like the complete opposite. You know, she's the optimist. Yin and yang here, literally. And via the colors as well. But I mean, this is the age that we live in, and we just have to like move with it. Because if you aren't moving with the flow, like you're going to be held back. So we're all moving with it in our own way. So like, how do you adjust to the fact that everything is like digital? You know, I like personally have tried online dating. Like I did 30 dates in 30 days before. I'm still single. Okay, so y'all know how that works out. So I would like introductions. So those things are just things that we value. It just depends on who you are.
Yeah, no, true. And I guess when you think about, you know, catfishing and spoofing and all that, I mean, all that stuff is real. So it can be a little challenging in terms of, you know, knowing if people are real online or whatever the case may be. But I guess that's just sort of the world we live in right now. And so as I think about some of the additional questions, you know, is there ever, you know, any real virtues or natural intentions that you think about when you're trying to nurture new relationships and new friendships, things like that?
What do you mean by?
So I think in terms, are there qualities basically? Are there qualities in people that you look for that, you know, you really like to be connected to hone in, to be around more or less?
Oh, okay. I liked your other question. You changed the question, Marcus. I like the question of what are some ways that you intentionally nurture your friendships? Because the qualities, I don't know. Just be a good person. But do you want me to follow the rules or no? I'm going to answer the question I want to answer. So, yeah. Okay. I like to be thoughtful and intentional with the friendships that I do have because I don't have a ton. Because, you know, I came in this call letting you all know that I'm skeptical of a whole lot of people. And so I like to be thoughtful in the way of, hey, letting you know that I got your back, whatever the heck you need. Be intentional about doing things that are sweet in a way, not in a weird way, a creepy way, but like in a nice way, like, hey, I wrote you a card in the mail, or I did this. I just want you to know that I value you. Just things that I could do to just go the extra mile to say, hey, like, you are someone that I value and I, you know, hold in high esteem in my life. And I took the time to go and do something extra to make sure that you knew that, as opposed to other friendships that we have where it's like, I mean, I talked to you for a year, but we're cool, you know, and if I saw you and you were in town, I would definitely help you out, but it's nothing like the other relationships that you have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to answer both your questions.
There you go, Nora. There you go.
Both. Don't make me choose. I mean, for me, like, first and foremost, if our politics are not aligned, I can't fuck with you. Like, if you're not here trying to overthrow the oppressive systems, like, deal breaker, hard no. I don't care how nice you are, how much clout you have, or whatever. Like, if you're not trying to get us all free, we can't be friends. And on that note, you've got to be honest and you've got to be authentic, because I can't compartmentalize. Like, we're either, you're like my everything friend or you're not my friend. I can't do the whole, like, you're my going out friend, this is my, like, brunch, all or nothing, because I can't, I'm a whole person. So those are kind of my, like, basic baseline for any kind of relationship. In terms of the nurturing, I tend to look at, like, what is it that this friend values? And then that's what I try to provide. So my friends who like time, they get time. My friends who like gifts, I'm gonna make you breakfast, or, like, you know, it just depends on what they need. And so for me, it's about being responsive to the things that they identify as valuable to them. And in general, I tend to be like, hey, thinking about you, checking in, like, how are you doing? What do you need? To create those touch points. Because I think we often forget that, like, we're being held by community. And so I like to be that reminder of, like, I see you, I hear you, I got you, even if we're not constantly in contact, like, we're still part of this system together.
Yeah, no, true. No,
Nora, are we gonna be friends after this? Hey, girl.
Are we not already friends? See, in my mind,
friends.
we're already friends.
We're friends, yeah. Are you a Scorpio?
Yeah. Taurus, Scorpio rising.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I know I liked you. I always love Tauruses. Like, all of my good friends that are women, aside from, like, a couple, are Tauruses.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And
it doesn't make sense, Marcus. You don't have to agree. I don't know what the hell you all are talking about.
We know. We know what it
is. And so I was thinking about a few more questions, at least one more questions. And if we have any viewers that are watching too, feel free to ask us any questions. But I'm curious to know what's been, like, your best method in terms of meeting new people and making friends.
Oh, I talk to strangers all the time.
Yeah, you know, that makes sense. I think when I think about myself, I guess I usually try to say hello. Typically in my profession, people recognize me a little more so around the community. And so a lot of times people do say hello. But yeah, outside of that, usually I try to at least say hello to people when I see them, and especially if I've seen them before or if they come up to me.
You know, I only speak to my elders. I live in, like, a douchebaggy kind of area in Chicago anyway, so we have to put on, like, this persona where, like, we don't care. But I do speak to all of my elders that I see on the street. Like, it's like an unspoken rule, you know, you speak to every one of your elders. So I definitely speak to them, and I speak to anyone that is in need. So everyone that doesn't have a home and maybe a little bit less unfortunate than me, I always speak to them. But everybody else, I'm kind of like, nah. Sorry, not sorry.
Oh, no worries. And when I think of just one more question, we have a person asking, so how do you know when it's time to let a friendship go?
That's a good question.
Oh, fuck.
I think when you feel like it's not serving you anymore, and you feel like it's beyond the limit of saving or fixing. Mm-hmm. I think people outgrow. I don't believe in, like, together forever in any context. And so I think sometimes even in a friendship, you outgrow each other, so when you feel like it's not providing to you anymore, or you're not able to provide to the other person anymore, I think that's a fair time to let it go.
How do you let it go then? Like, what do you say? I'm letting you go because you don't serve me anymore?
I think it depends. I think sometimes you just naturally like stop talking and it just drifts away and you both have this like mutual understanding. I think sometimes there needs, I think friendships can be toxic in the same way that relationships can be toxic. And so sometimes in those cases you have to have a conversation and say, this isn't right for me, or I think we've outgrown and I think that's part of emotional accountability, is to say the things or to have those difficult conversations, rather than just ghosting your friends of like 30 years or whatever. But you sit down the same way you would break up with a partner. You sit down and you have that conversation, and then you set the boundaries. So does that mean that you're not going to go out anymore, but you'll still be Facebook friends? Or you're not going to talk to each other ever? Like, what does it mean to change? Because the other part of it is, I don't think it has to be all or nothing, but you can set boundaries within the friendship so that it's giving you what you need. Hey, I really want to be your friend, but when you call me at 3 a.m. all the time, I don't have capacity for that. So here's what works for me. Like having those conversations so you can set the parameters of what works. And then if they can respond and accept that, great. If they can't, then that's when you might have to set a stronger boundary or let the relationship go.
No, that makes sense. I think when I think about my own personal life, typically if you do something shady, I typically try to distance myself from that person in that situation, just so I can sort of protect myself and my mental space and all of that.
Yeah, I should probably keep my lips closed because I don't really know how to eloquently put this answer.
Go for it, Micae. I thought you was a G.
I would love to hear the uneloquent version.
I don't know. I'm kind of going through something right now, and so that's probably why it's like kind of hitting home. And I don't think I've ever taken the approach that I should have, Nora, the good, healthy breakup route with a friend. It's just always kind of been the, cold, you don't exist, let me put you in a closet, which isn't great because it's that relationship still plagues your conscience and it still eats you up. But I think that some people, okay, let me say for me, I think that I give a lot in friendships, and then I think that I expect to have like the same thing reciprocated, and I should stop having expectations. And so then I'm giving and giving and giving, and then I'm like, yo, I needed you for one thing, like, and you weren't even there for me. And then I'm blowing the hell up, and this person is like, I don't understand why you're blowing up. It's just this one thing. And I'm like, but dude, I've been giving to you for 10 years, and I asked you for one thing. So I think going into relationships for me, I need to, like, moving forward, I need to manage my expectations. I need to either A, have 0 expectations for people, or B, let them know that I'm actually having expectations for them, so that I'm not like building this narrative in my head around what they didn't do for me when they didn't know that they should have did something for me. I literally just coached myself through that because I was saying something completely different in my head.
I think that comes up a lot, right? Like, we have these expectations, but they're in our head and you don't know it. And so then I'm mad at something that, like, you had no idea of, you know what I'm saying? And
Absolutely.
So that's the part, like, when I talk about like self-care and things like that, like, learning that this is what I need and communicating it is just as important as like going to brunch with your best friend or something like that. Like, those things go together.
Even when you meet someone for the first time too, even professionally, I think that it's important to establish expectations.
Yeah.
This is what I want out of this connection. This is what I can do for you, or what have you. I think it's important for us to like build healthy connections and build a great reputation, is to manage people's expectations and then like over deliver on them, as opposed to not having any. And then who knows what people are out there thinking of you, walking around blindly with blind expectations.
Yeah. Well, and I think people are hesitant or uncomfortable around having those conversations.
Yeah.
And I'll say, especially as like a woman of color, because there's the fear of, oh, I'm going to be perceived as like difficult or too aggressive or like all these things that we hear. But what I found really is people appreciate having that clarity, especially in professional settings. Like,
absolutely,
this protects me, it protects you, it makes sure we're on the right page. And we learn that we can have these conversations. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to have this relationship be ongoing, this is going to be an important part of it. But it's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have in the beginning, especially when things are good, because you don't want to, like, I don't want to bring anything bad into the space, but no, it's just a way of protecting what we're already working on.
Yeah. I think that's so important. And for those people that may feel insecure, I feel like you should go take it from the angle of, what do you have to lose? Like, this person doesn't sign the front or the back of your check. You have everything to gain. And I truly live behind, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So shoot your shot and let people know what they can expect from you, and lead with how you're going to help them first. So the conversation's always a lot easier because you're leading with how you can help.
Well, okay. And let me take it one more level.
Yeah.
Because now what you're also seeing is, how well does this person receive you? Mm-hmm. And so it's not, I think oftentimes we think that like, we just have to be happy to be in the room, happy to have your attention, but once you realize that you also have something that you're offering, and you come to the table with something, that it is a two-way relationship, even when there are power differentials. Mm-hmm. You also get to see, how does this person treat you? How do they value you? Right. So you also have the power to say no, or you can also be, right? We're so afraid of the other side's no, or the other side's like whatever, but you also have that decision-making power to say, you know what? I didn't like that you didn't want to have this conversation, and that maybe we don't need to work together, or whatever that might be. And so it's a very telling, kind of informative. That's the thing, is like, if you can just be curious about these kinds of back and forths, rather than being fearful or like anxious, it actually gives a ton of information about the relationship and how you're structuring it. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that all makes sense in terms of, how we meet people, how we hang out, things like that. And so with the final question, let's see if we can see a few more questions. I guess, if you had to think about maybe one more quality of, that you would be interested in a person, whether it's teamwork or calming nature, ability, effort, or efficacy, or basically just quality word that can describe a person and how you look for someone in a friendship or in a relationship. If you can think about that, for me, I always think about someone who is trustworthy, and also who is respectful, who is honest and caring. Those are sort of the things that I look for.
I'm going to piggyback off of you, Marcus. Trust is everything to me, and so I know that I want to know that if I tell you something, that 10 more people aren't going to know that what I just told you. And I want to know that if I called you at 3 a.m. because I got locked up, that you'd be able to come and buy me out. Like, that's the type of things that I look for. If you can't provide that, it's fine. It doesn't mean that I won't help you in the future. It just means that you're not my everything friend. You're over here. It doesn't mean that you don't exist. It's just, you're a person. I feel like we should all treat people nicely. And if like you can help someone, help someone. It's just that you just don't know my bra size and what I ate this morning. It's just, you're not very intimate in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I would, I already said like the politics and trust, integrity, accountability, like all that stuff. But also for me, curiosity is really important. I want to surround myself with people who are curious and like learning and open and not so like narrow-minded, because then we can like learn and explore and like have adventures together, and like that's fun. That's fun.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so so as we get ready to close this and we think about that main question, I definitely think it is important to think about how you can meet people, figure out ways to connect with people, whether it's through websites or groups, meetups, Eventbrites, all those things that people use to attend events and at least connect with people. And hopefully people can use those resources to, make fuller relationships and, broader connections with people.
before you close out, because you're sending people to groups, I would like to piggyback and just say, if you are joining a group, manage your expectations. So if you're joining, for instance, a group for dogs, okay? Just know that you're joining a group for people that want to build relationships for their dogs. They aren't necessarily joining the group because they personally want to build relationships. Their dogs want friends. And so just be cognizant of the type of groups that you're building, because then you can come in with the wrong expectations. And then you're like, well, I don't understand what I mean to be friends. It's like, well, you joined the wrong group. So be intentional about the events or the groups that you go out to so that you're not disappointed. And then your confidence is lessened because you didn't get the results that you wanted, but you have to be intentional about the groups that you go out to be a part of.
Yeah. And also start your own groups. Like if there's something out there that you want that you're not seeing, start it, you know? And that's just as simple as like starting a meetup or sending out a couple tweets and like asking your network to invite other people. Like there's a degree of safety that I think you're talking about, but then there's also a degree of like, take the risk, be vulnerable, do something brave, because you can't build friendships without a little bit of risk.
Yeah. I guess, everybody takes great risks, great rewards, and at least you hope for, awards that can help you, or at least help you grow. Rewards in terms of, connecting with people. I think I might need a drink or something tonight, but as we wrap it up, we are definitely thankful to Nick and Glappitnova for putting this together, and thankful to the people who had a couple of questions along the way. It was a pleasure meeting you two ladies.
Great to meet you. Thank you. You've been an awesome host.
And so let's hope we all can reconnect at some point again. Oh,
absolutely. We're all friends now.
Exactly.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.